1866, and up to about into the 1920s, black folk had the greatest economic achievement they've ever had in this country. Even though it didn't occur under integration, it occurred under segregation. Those black folk had managed to acquire over 20 million acres of land, according to the United States Census in 1920. 20 million acres of land. But between 1920s and 1950s, they lost almost all of it. Back in the 1920s and up to the 1940s, we had black broom factories, we had black mattress factories. Almost every black major city had at least 2 cab companies. We had black bus companies. We had black shipyard up here in Baltimore. When I say black bus lines, I'm not talking about just having 3 or 4 buses. We had over 500 buses. And this is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And our bus company didn't just service just the black neighborhoods, it serviced the blacks and the white neighborhoods. We had 2 black cab companies. We had the Harris Cab Companies and the Campbell City Cab Companies. But they used to have their own restaurants. They had the best nightclubs in the country. The blacks had 2 baseball leagues. Each baseball league had 8 teams. We had over 500 of the best baseball players in the world. But what did they do? They wanted to integrate. So as soon as they put Jackie Robinson on the Brooklyn Dodgers, black folks said, we'll give up all of our black baseball leagues, black teams, and all our black players, and we can just get one black boy to play on a white team.
Black Americans were gung-ho about integration because we thought that would be our passport to freedom. We equated integration with freedom.
That scared whites to death. And see, at that time you had whites, a lot of these white separate communities. You had white Polish communities, you had white Jewish communities, you had white Italian communities, you had white Irish communities. And white folks said, well, if these blacks are going to integrate, we're going to come together and organize as a unit. And so white folk then dropped all their little communities and said, no, we're going to organize as a one white block. We're not going to talk about I'm being Polish and you're Irish and German anymore. We ain't going to do that anymore. We're going to stick together as a group. We're not going to let all these blacks come and penetrate us.
Because we were doing things and becoming self-sufficient, that became a threat. So instead of them just coming out and attacking, because they couldn't just come out with an all-out attack, we were a little bit too strong for that, and we would have fought back, and there would have been a civil unrest that would have definitely undermined the security of the country. Instead, they said, well, let's invite them into a place that they've always coveted, and that is into the white estuaries of power, into the white citadels of power. Let us make sure we bring them in and incorporate them to us, and therefore, being that they're going to have to buy their facilities and all their materials from us, they're going to have to interface with us anyway, they're going to dress like us, act like us, and we will take the best of what they have and capitalize eventually and take it over. We will have quelled or stopped any threat or competition to our business, and that's exactly what they did.
So black folks stripped themselves of all their resources, they stripped themselves of their unity, they stripped themselves of the role model when all blacks used to live together. Then they had their own role models. All the doctors and lawyers and teachers with the black lived all together. You had a sense of community. You knew each other, you trusted each other, you worked with each other, you participated with each other. You learned how to buy from each other, to sell each other, to support each other, to care about each other, to love each other. When black folk up in integration, blacks never locked their homes.
We practice a very profound humanity. If an Asian opens a store in our community, we do not boycott and discriminate against them. If an Arab opens a store in our community, we do not boycott and discriminate against them. If a Jewish person opens a store in our community, we do not boycott and discriminate against them. We shop with all peoples. We treat all peoples equally. The problem is they're not treating us equally. See, we caught in our own humanity. And until we begin to address that and demand that others practice towards us the same human concern and love that we practice towards them, we will stay in this situation.
Durham, North Carolina was the most progressive and best black Wall Street we had in America. That's why you had all the black major insurance companies, mortgage companies, and banks and all was in Durham, North Carolina. Durham, North Carolina was the black Wall Street.
Tulsa race riot. And it wasn't really a race riot because the people who rioted were the whites, not the Africans. The Africans defended their territory. They defended their stores and their businesses and their families, but they were destroyed by the whites who were envious of the economic power base that they had developed. And so you'll find that the disturbance ended when the sheriff of Tulsa commandeered a plane and had the pilot fly over the black community and drop sticks of dynamite. So Tulsa became the first city in the world that was bombed from the air.
It was also a way to destroy the ability for a black competition, because essentially the world knew what was happening in the United States to black people, and they were going to give deference to black businesses, in Europe even, because France was ready to do business with Tulsa, Oklahoma. England was ready to do business with Tulsa, Oklahoma, except there are certain parts in Parliament that did not want that. Canada was ready to do business. South America was ready to do business with South. All of Africa, we were ready to essentially undermine what those cotton plantations had built up in the form of commerce for the United States. And they had to make sure that that was destroyed.
There was a group from Tulsa, an R&B group from Tulsa, the Gap Band, had a song called "You Dropped the Bomb on Me, Baby." It's about the Tulsa riot. Gap Band, GAP. GAP are the initials for the streets Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, which was the hub of Black Tulsa Business District.
They have this whole thing that black people get handouts, that black people are dependent on the government. Black people, if we're going to be very honest, black people have never got anything specifically from our government at the exclusion of another group. Never. Black people have never got any kind of welfare benefits at the exclusion of another group. Black people have never gotten affirmative action at the exclusion of another group. Affirmative action benefits white women more than anybody.
Slavery was affirmative action. Slavery was affirmative action. Jim Crow segregation was affirmative action. It was rewarding those people who had certain kind of skin complexion. That's what it was for. Affirmative action was written to be corrective action. C-O-R-R-E-C-T-I-V-E, corrective. Corrective action for what? For something that the government has consistently done to impede, to exploit, to degrade, and to degenerate a specific group of people. That's what it was written for. It had nothing to do with gender, handicap, senior citizens, gays, midgets, humpbacks, just black people. That's the only people the government had systematically at all levels, from the state, county, and federal level, had gone out of their way to pass laws, slave codes, and see, blacks couldn't get out of slavery because of the federal government.
The average black business can't even get the capital to present itself to the black population that the other people can get the capital to do. Now, one would ask the question, how can all these poor immigrants come to this country and have all this capital? If they had that capital, why did they leave home? And if they didn't have the capital when they left home, how are they getting this capital here when they have no credit records and they have no paper trail and they have not? So who's capitalizing them? And I think if we begin to look at that question, we'll begin to get to the bottom of what's going on in the black community.